My name is Alonzo Russell. I am a recording artist, and I'm from a little small town near Chicago called Rockford, Illinois. And I'm here.
All right, and my name is Janice Whitlock, and I'm a developmental psychologist working with the JED Foundation and doing research on issues related to this area. So I'm super glad to be here with you. Thank you so much for making time.
Thank you.
So before we jump into the mental health stuff, I wonder if you can just tell me how you got to be sitting in this seat right now. What is it about you? I mean, you're pretty well known. I know that you've given a lot of yourself. Tell me how you got here.
You know, I was just asked for someone to ask my story.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I don't know if I could say that fast. And she was like, just give me the Spark Notes version.
Okay.
And so if I was to give a Sparks Notes version, it would be a little boy that grew up in a small town right near Chicago. Rockford, Illinois was in Forbes for the 9th most dangerous city in America. And it enters that top 10 list every year. It hasn't changed much. This little black boy that grew up in that town kind of suffered from anger and depression from, I'd say, the beginning. I remember really dark moments in my childhood where I would just be so frustrated, you know, because I really didn't understand what was happening. I just knew that I didn't like going to school because kids were always bothering me. I wasn't the toughest guy, you know. I don't have the deepest voice. And people would always mess with me. And so one of the ways that I kind of learned to stop that was to just go crazy. And looking back on it, I kind of smile because it's so different than who I am now. But I would literally just lose my temper. My mom was coming to the school every day sometimes to calm me down, to eat with me, to something. And most of the time I was getting suspended from school every week. I would get suspended 3 days, go back home, and come back and most likely get suspended on the day that I returned from suspension. And we couldn't really figure out why I was just having these lash outs. And I'm not talking about like a child that just crosses their arms and pouts. I'm talking about going through the library and pushing over all of the bookshelves. And they're coming in there like, wait, he's only this tall. How did it looks like a tornado came through this place, you know?
Yeah.
But I was just so angry. And whenever somebody would make fun of me, or there were very triggering words that could be used that would make me like just go crazy, I had no idea why I was doing the things that I was doing, but for some reason it was just coming out of me. So fast forward, 7th grade, I mean, here we are, that's many years of anger and depression. At this time, I'm seeing a counselor, I'm taking medication for depression. I was taking Zoloft. And 7th grade, I entered my first talent show. And I impersonated Michael Jackson at the talent show. I got a little raggedy t-shirt. I stole one of my mom's blazers out of her closet, and she had a little extension piece that I just stuck right here. I didn't have a full wig, I just had the little extension because I was Michael. And I went out there 7th grade and did a talent show. And this video is actually on YouTube, that first performance.
That's great.
And I was going down the stairs, and I had like this vision. I told them to all cut the lights off and put a spotlight at the top of the stairs, and I'm gonna come down the stairs and dance. And that night I got my first standing ovation. And that standing ovation that night changed the course of my life, because it was the first time that I felt seen.
Yeah.
For all of those people to be just standing there seeing me for who I was in that moment.
Yeah.
It just was so healing. And somehow from that day forward, I never got suspended from school again. And I went on to start a dance crew. I went to an arts high school in Rockford called Auburn High School. I graduated through the CAPAS program, Creative and Performing Arts. And there were a few other talented people that came out of the city and out of that school. Michelle from Destiny's Child graduated from that school as well, through the same program.
All right.
And so I went on to start a dance crew when I entered that program. I ended up taking all of those kids to America's Got Talent. We became semi-finalists on America's Got Talent. And through other discoveries, I made my transition to music. I went to China for 5 years and headlined 4 tours, moved to LA, and I've been on the LA grind ever since.
And the rest is history, and here you sit.
The rest is history.
Yeah, all right. Thank you so much for sharing that. So, I mean, you talked about the early anger, and then there's this period where you blossom, it sounds like. And then somewhere in there you come back to tell us, you're sitting here to tell us your sort of mental health journey. Can you tell me a little more about where that began?
I mean, for context here, my whole life I was a dancer. It started with the Michael Jackson thing. I was dancing, but I could really sing, and I would sing in church, and I would sing at, like, this probably sounds sad, but I would sing at all of the family's funerals, and for some reason I just was never brave enough to go into it. So with America's Got Talent, I was there and I realized, wow, you're telling millions to fight for their dreams, because you got to think, like, we're 15 black kids from this really, really rough city, and we're on the biggest talent show in the world. And so our message was, you guys can do it too. Don't let your fears hold you back. Fight for your dreams. And I remember sitting in those interviews just saying to myself, you're telling millions of people to fight for their dreams, and you're not really pursuing your real dream. My real dream was to be a singer. And so it was really in that moment that I started to feel called to, I guess, tell the truth, and not just be on TV trying to, like, make everything look good.
Yeah.
And so it was right after America's Got Talent that we went on a school tour, and I started to really develop this passion for speaking to the kids at the schools. And so I go back to the same schools that I graduated from, and I went to other schools in the city, and the school would literally call an assembly for the whole student body to come and hear me basically tell the story of, I walk the same hallways as you, and I've been able to go on and do these amazing things, and here's how you do it. I just felt like it was my responsibility, because no one had ever done that before. No little black boy from Rockford, Illinois has ever gone to China.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you have the story of anger, and then it turns into this amazing story of you. But I think there's probably other stuff going on back there.
Yeah.
Right? So can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So first, I was an only child. I was always with mom. And somewhere between, I'd say, maybe kindergarten and 2nd grade, my brother got here. I have a younger brother. He's 3 years behind me. He got here, and she just started working so much more. And she was working 2 jobs and putting herself through college. Like, mom was like a superhero to me. And even though she was very present, there were moments where I would feel like I don't have my mom to tell about what's happening, because me and my mom, we're super close. Mm-hmm. We've always been this way. We were like inseparable, but when she was working a lot, she just was working, and when we were home, she was sleeping, you know? And so I think that anger that carried on into school was me just not having mommy to kind of vent to anymore.
Right.
And I was different from the other kids.
Yeah.
And so what was happening was that I was feeling different.
Yeah.
I felt like I did not belong there. And fast forward to kind of getting to a place where I found something that I love to do. I found a place where I could fit. My mental health journey started to change to fighting the inner voice that knew that I had a bigger calling than this small little town, you know. The thing is in a small town, people do things a certain way.
Right.
And if you look up the top 3 employers in Rockford, Illinois, the employers are Chrysler, Rockford Public Schools, and the Rockford medical industry.
Yeah.
So it basically says, most likely, you're gonna either work at a factory, you'll be a teacher or a nurse. So for the kids that are interested in the arts, especially during those days, it was just like, you couldn't tell your parents that you had other interests, because it was like, no, you need to focus on you need to come up with a real plan. You need to go to school, you know what I mean? And this is very common around the music business and arts, where people feel like, you know, it's not a real job.
Right.
And so what was happening for me is that I felt this bigger calling, and I was surrounded by people kind of telling me that you need to be realistic, you know, you need to find a real plan.
Right.
And that was kind of depressing, you know,
that
it was really frustrating to know that I had many visions of performing on television. I had many visions of going around the world, but I was surrounded by people that had never seen that done before. So you can just imagine how, for a second, you can kind of think like, well, wait, is this even really possible?
Right.
There was this transition from the anger to depression to just really trying to fight for what I seen for myself. And then when it started to happen, and things started to like come to fruition for me, all of these traumas that I had before that were starting to come up. And that's where we are today. You know, right now it's about me healing from the traumas and telling these stories so that we can help other kids kind of identify these traumas from the beginning, so that they don't get old. I hope I'm not old.
You are so not old.
I'm 30, but still. But so that they don't get 30 and have to go back and fix everything. You know what I mean?
It sounds like you didn't find your path and then everything magically resolves. It sounds like you found your path. You found the expression of yourself, and stuff still came up and comes up, right? But now you have techniques, skills, practices, things that you use to help yourself navigate. Can you talk to us a little bit about those things? What were key turning points, and you know, how did you learn to work with the feelings inside that felt so big?
I know that the first big turning point was that transition from being a dancer to a singer. And so I kind of hid my voice, and I would literally just kind of just act like it didn't exist. Whenever I would sing for someone, they would be like, oh no, you just need to keep dancing. And the real reason why I later discovered when I learned like about singing was that obviously you need breath to sing, and when you're nervous, you can't breathe. So when people would be like, hey, well, you want to be a singer, sing me something, I would sound like crap because I couldn't breathe, and then they would be like, baby,
just dance.
Singing is not for you. I guess what happened is it made me become really insecure with my voice. And that's why I left. I went to another country, you know, and I used those 5 years in China to work on my voice. And how that relates to what's happening now is that this journey has really been about me having to reteach myself how to believe in what I saw for myself time and time again.
Yeah.
You know, this time I have this vision of this amazing singer that has this voice to share with the world. Mm-hmm. And I hid it. Why? Because I was afraid of what people would think.
So I'm out there thinking about how there's so many people who have that inside of them, and maybe they're never going to make it to a stage. Maybe it's not going to be grandiose, but what they need is what you have, which there was it courage, vision? How would you describe what it was that allowed you to say, I'm going to go to China
I'm just going to go.
And use this to kind of practice?
You know, when kids ask me, how do I get started?
Yeah.
I just say, start. It's the most simple answer. Like, you just do it, you know? And you do it afraid. Because that's the thing. Mm-hmm. Most of the time we're feeling at a standstill because we don't want to make a wrong move.
Right.
And when we don't want to make a wrong move, we're also waiting for everything to be ready for us to make the move. I need to be ready. I need to have this much money. I need my parents to do this for me. It's just so many, I guess, stories that we tell ourselves about all of the things that we need to pursue our dreams. When in all actuality, it's just about moving forward and allowing things to happen. You know, my biggest lesson of turning 30 was just like, I'm no longer trying to make things happen. I'm allowing things to happen.
Oh, that is so perfect, because that is exactly my experience too. It's not about making, it's about allowing. But you said something before that's really important, which is you said your fear is going to be there no matter what, right? So
Yes.
You learned how to act even though you were afraid.
Yeah.
So there's a bigger container than just your fear.
Yes. And whenever people hear me talk about being free of fear, it's like, well, wait, does that mean that fear does not exist? No, it's not that fear doesn't exist. It's that we no longer allow fear to control our lives. Because fear is always going to be there. Right. I think the biggest thing is being able to know the difference between the voice of fear and intuition.
So how would you, tell me
well,
about that.
This is the thing. You know, when you feel like that loud voice in your gut, like I felt it in my gut, like you heard this big voice. Most people think that is like their gut, that's intuition. But most of the time, if it's loud, you like feel that feeling in your stomach and your chest, that is usually fear. Intuition comes through much more quiet. It's that more peaceful voice in the back of your mind that says, now you know I think you should do this. And we often ignore that voice because that voice is not screaming at us.
That's right.
You know, but I think that if we can know the difference between the voice of fear and intuition, then we can know that just because this loud, fearful voice is telling me that, oh, I better not do this because all of these things could go wrong. If your intuition is saying, but look at what can happen if it goes right.
Right.
Look at what can happen if you fight right now for your dream. It makes all of the difference. And so for me, if I hear that little voice, I'm going to do it anyway. Yeah.
The role of other people in supporting you. So I don't know, we haven't talked to did you ever have a therapist? Did you go to therapy?
When I don't even remember what grade this was, but when I was like in elementary, that was when I had my first experience with a counselor.
Okay.
And my experience there was I don't really remember talking to her. I just remember my mom and her speaking, and I just remember getting prescribed medication. And the medication that I was on was Zoloft. It was I think an antidepressant.
It's an antidepressant, yeah.
And some time went by where my mom had no idea that I had stopped taking the medication. I had got into the arts, and there was something in me that was just moving in a better direction. And so one day she was like, wait, do you not take medicine anymore? I was like, girl, I don't need that medication. And she was just like, well, wait, how? And somehow the proof was just through my actions that, wait, he hasn't got in trouble. Fast forward to the transition in me wanting to be a singer. This was right after America's Got Talent. There was a production company in town that had reached out to me and wanted me to audition to be in a musical. I sang in the audition, and the producer of the musical was just like, wait, you're not a singer? And so long story short, that day was the day that I met my manager, who has now been my manager for the last 10 years. And he was a life coach. And so in meeting the manager, I would say that me really making that transition into becoming the singer that was able to go to China and really believe that I could make a singing career for myself was meeting my manager. And just one person, you know, that saw a star in me. And he said, from that day, you have this one of the most beautiful voices I've ever heard in my life. You are a star. And up until that point, nobody had ever said that to me before. And I talk to him every morning. I talk to him on the way here today. And he's been my biggest support system. But in recent, over the last 2 years, I've been able to bring on some other support. I do have a therapist, and I am big on Black people going to therapy specifically, because that's not something that we always did. You know, I think in our culture, it's always one of the things that Mama would always say is, what goes on in my house stays in my house. When I was growing up, it was fix your face, you bet not cry, wipe those tears. And what happened was you kind of develop this habit of like pushing down your emotions. And so as you grow, you kind of like dodge your emotions. You don't allow yourself to feel them. And so my biggest message to Black men and men specifically is to feel. You know, allow yourself to feel, because that is how you become a good father. That is how you are a good son. If you can have empathy and compassion, and you can be genuine with what it is you are feeling, that is, to me, the way toward healing, because when you feel, you can heal.
So was therapy important in that for you, or did that come through other paths?
I've always been emotional. So I haven't had the biggest challenge with feeling my emotions, but it's been more so about expressing them and not allowing them to impact me negatively, because my history of expressing my emotions was to lose my temper. And so now it's about finding more productive ways to express my emotions. I don't believe in making permanent decisions with temporary emotions. So that's another tool that I've learned, is to just pause when I'm feeling something so that I don't just react.
Right.
I think it's no secret that systemic and historic racism has created and significantly increased environment where black men are more likely to experience trauma.
Right.
And whether that be in the streets where you gotta always have your guard up, that nobody's gonna attack you or that something is gonna happen, I think it just kind of creates this subconscious guard that you always have up,
Right.
because something can go wrong at any moment.
Right.
Because I think that we all have that ability to go into survival mode, and it comes in handy. But I don't think that we need to be there all the time. And for the sake of our mental health, it's just so important for us to just be present in what's happening right now.
Tell me a little bit about the tools that you use that you think others could learn or practice.
One of the things that is really important for me is that I do not touch my phone in the morning before I meditate. And
Is your phone near you at night?
no, it is not.
Oh, very good.
So the first thing is that my phone is on the complete opposite side of the room. And my mom is always like, why do you do that? Because if it's an emergency, I'm like, well, if there's an emergency, I'll find out about it when I get to the phone.
Yeah.
And emergencies don't happen every day, you know what I mean? So why would we want to just wait for something to happen?
It keeps us primed up like you were just talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't talk on the phone and I don't look at the phone, not even the notifications, until I have grounded myself for the day first.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that my mentor says is, he says, check yourself before you check your phone. And that's made the biggest difference for me. And then meditation.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you meditate every day?
Yes, I meditate every morning. So I practice freedom meditation, which is not the standard meditation that is done around the world. I was one of the people that I couldn't really get into meditation, because what was happening was that I couldn't stop thinking. And that's what they kind of say, like, you're supposed to think about nothing, or you're supposed to focus on one thing. So like, close your eyes, take deep breaths, and imagine the ocean flowing and the flame of a candle.
It works for about 30 seconds, right?
Yeah, and then now you're thinking about like, what am I gonna eat? You know, or I gotta do this, or I forgot to respond to this. And so I was one of those people that initially trying to meditate, it wasn't working. And I came across freedom meditation through a good friend of mine, Justin Michael Williams. He actually wrote the first ever meditation guide for people of color and LGBTQ and just all of the different people in the world. Right. This meditation guide was for them. And freedom meditation was just about not having to sit perfect, but relaxing. You know, I literally just put my legs out and I put the blanket up around my neck and I put my hands over my heart, and I'm just so comfy, because the biggest part of meditating is to be comfortable. And then getting the breath right, and then we just focus on a particular mantra that we're working on right now. So my mantra right now is freedom. And it's about, you know, wanting to be mentally free and free from all of my doubts and fears and all of those different things. And so you just speaking to yourself freedom over and over again. And as thoughts come, they're kind of like, you kind of recycle them in, but it's really an anchor mantra, because mantra really means anchor, of tool of thought.
Right.
And so that tool is that, yeah, I might think about what else I have to do, but I just bring myself right back to freedom. And that's where I just ground myself in the day.
And how long do you do that for?
I do 15 minutes.
Yeah.
I always tell people that I started at 13 minutes because I felt like 10 was too short and 15 was too long. But I recently went to 15. But I have friends that meditate for 45 minutes and whatever. But I think the biggest takeaway here is that you can do a little of something a lot.
That's right.
And get much more benefits than doing a lot of something a few times a month. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
The biggest thing is I can't do 45 minutes every single day.
Yeah.
But I know I can do 15 minutes every day.
That's
and
right.
I get the benefits of that.
What happens if anger shows back up again, or, I mean, you know, flashes of emotion during the day? Are there things that you know you can turn to then?
Anytime that I feel really any heavy emotion coming up, I go to find something that I can hear that can speak to the thing that I'm going through. And there's obviously a limitless supply on YouTube. And so I love to listen to some of the top motivational coaches in the world. And I also like T.D. Jakes. He's a bishop in Texas, but he doesn't just talk from the religious perspective. He always speaks like about mental health and this type of thing. It's always in the mind. And so whenever I'm feeling something, I know that I need to address the mind. You know, what am I overthinking? You know, what is real? I have literally a note in my phone, and it says, come here when you begin to overthink. And the first question is, what are the facts? Because that's the other thing. We're always creating scenarios that aren't real.
Right.
You know, we can imagine something and literally feel the chemical response as if it's really happening.
Right.
And so the biggest thing for me is just making sure that I know that if I'm having a moment, wait, have I created something? Okay, so this is what's happening. All right. What are the solutions that we can come up with right now? You know.
If you were talking to young people, probably going to be tuning in. If you could give them advice or wisdom, what would you share?
Whenever I'm asked this question, I like to just think of what I would tell young Alonzo.
That's good.
Like right now.
Yeah.
If I was to be able to speak to him.
Yeah.
And I would just tell him to relax. You know, I know sometimes it feels like the end of the world. And it feels like everything is depending on this one little moment. Like nothing can ever get better from here. But the clock is going to keep ticking. And that every day is an opportunity for you to do better, you know? And I think the biggest thing is just being okay with the pace. Knowing that things can always get better, but it doesn't have to be tomorrow. But if you do the work, and if you take, I always tell people, even when you're taking baby steps, you're still moving forward. I had so much anxiety about what I didn't have, you know, and where I wanted to go, and the vision that I seen for myself that I had no idea how I would achieve it. But now it's about, okay, I'm gonna do this. And I'm gonna, literally, my routine is I set myself a power action. My power action today was to send an email before I came here and to come here. And I'm done for the day. And tomorrow I have my actions for the day. And that way I'm not overwhelming myself. You know what I mean? So the biggest thing that I would tell the inner child is breathe. You got time. And for someone from my type of place, you know, don't get me wrong, it is a blessing to be able to make it to your 30th birthday. I've lost a lot of friends. But you have time, you know? And it's so funny how kids think. It's just like, I can't take this right now, you know? And I understand how that can feel. But I think the biggest thing is to just know that no pain lasts forever. You know, it's about being resilient enough to see the benefits of not giving up. Yeah.
What would you tell the older generation?
I'm always telling mom to look at the facts too. Because somehow the older generation has this understanding of like what was, but since then the facts have changed. And so I think it's time to relook at the facts. You know, what is happening now? This is the first time in history where these early 20-year-olds are able to make more money from a post on social media than our parents ever could have in 40 hours at their job that week.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a different time. So what are the facts, you know?
Yeah.
And in understanding that, you find different places to put pressure on your children. You know, it's different now. Yeah.
I mean, we stand on the precipice of a pretty amazing time. There's lots happening in this country and other places. It kind of feels like a chaotic time in the world. What gives you hope?
These kids give me hope.
Me too.
When I see like the Justin Biebers and even the Smiths, the Willow and Jaden Smith, like Jaden Smith literally has several homeless food trucks that give out free food here in LA. Yeah. Like, we didn't have those type of priorities, but this young adult already feels the responsibility to make a difference in the world. They're smart way sooner than we were.
That's true.
And so what happens is, if you are as smart as you are in your early 20s, wisdom is bound to come.
Alonzo, talk to me about how you help other people that you know are struggling.
The first thing that I always listen for, no matter who I'm talking to, is what is the thing that is kind of starting whatever it is that you're going through? What is the root? You know, what is really happening? And whatever it is you're feeling, it is valid. You know, we don't want to go into the shame and the blame. It's about allowing whatever it is that's coming up to come through, because like I said earlier, when you feel, you can heal. It's like we prioritize happiness and joy and all of these things that, you know, release the good chemicals in our brains. But these emotions are equal to sadness and anger and fear.
Yeah.
When I'm speaking to people about what's happening in their lives, it's not just about change, because to just change something means that it can go back to what it used to be. But to transform something, it is physically impossible for it to go back to the original state. So it's like the caterpillar becoming a butterfly. We're transforming the history and our relationship to our traumas and our relationship to our mental health, you know? And how do I, as a Black man, transform that relationship? It starts with me knowing why I felt the way that I felt in the first place. So that when things come up, I can say, I know what that looks like. I remember that trigger. How you doing? You have no power today. You know? The biggest transformation for me was no longer being afraid of my anger. Because when I was angry as a child and I got away from that, what happened then was that now I never ever wanted to lose my temper again, because I knew what I was capable of. So then it was just like, let me just make sure that I never get mad. It's impossible.
That, you know.
And so the biggest transformation for me was meeting my anger face to face and saying, we mad. And anger is great because it's got a lot of things done. Anger changed the world many times. That's how my people got their rights, you know. But I think the biggest thing is that now the real transformation is being able to just respect what it is that I'm feeling, and then be able to pause and choose different actions from that, you know. There's no validation more important than your own. You don't need to reach outside of yourself for anything. It's inside. It is right there for you to access. And I think how this relates to social media is that we got all of these things constantly telling us how to feel, you know, and what we should be doing, how we should be looking, this type of relationship you should have, this the type of smoothie you should drink, this type of car you should drive, you should have this many followers and this many likes and this many comments, or you're nobody. I want to tell these kids that you say what matters for you. You know,
Yeah.
it's about what you say to you.
Yeah.
None of this social media stuff is real. And if anything, I'd say the biggest thing is just to allow social media to be a tool where you express more love and more peace into the world. Allow it to do more good. It's not just about showing off and trying to show all of these cool things. But if more of us take the action through social media to make a difference, then the other side of that is that people will see our posts and they won't feel like we took something away from them. We'll feel like we gave them something.
Right.
So let's use social media for good.
I love that. Thank you, Alonzo. That's a wonderful way to end.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you coming. Thank you so much for your time today, and most especially for your wisdom. Really, it's going to make a big difference in the world.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You see, you may find hope where you thought none could exist.